G'day everyone, Psycho Gengar here. When it comes to what Pokemon type is the strongest, a lot of people have differing opinions on the topic, but I wanted to have a more objective approach. I wanted to determine which of the 18 different types was mathematically the strongest, based purely on the offensive and defensive type matchups. So that's what this video aims to find out. I'll take you through my process step by step, and at the end I'll give a tier list based on what I calculated. Before we get into it, I should mention that I'm by no means a statistician, so my methods might seem a little bit simplistic to those of you who are. If you have any thoughts on how I could improve my process, please don't hesitate to let me know in the comments section. And if you enjoy the video, then please also consider subscribing. The first thing I had to do was get a basic type matchup chart. There are many of these online, so it was simply a matter of transferring the data to a spreadsheet simply to make it easier for me to work with. Just to show you how I use this, I use the column on the left as the attacking type, while the top row is the defending type. So, let's say you wanted to calculate the effectiveness of a water type move attacking a rock type Pokemon. You would first go down the column on the left and find the water type, then go right until you reach the rock type column, and you would find the result. The numbers on the spreadsheet represent the effectiveness of the move, 2 being super effective, 1 being neutral, 0.5 being not very effective, and 0 being immune. The next thing I did was look purely at how each individual type matched up defensively, giving 2 points to the type for every immunity, 1 point for every resistance, and taking away 1 point for each weakness. Unsurprisingly, the Steel type was the winner of this category, with its 1 immunity, 10 resistances, and only 3 weaknesses, giving it a total of 9 points. The second strongest type defensively, with a total of 4 points, was the Ghost type, its unique trait of having 2 immunities pushing it up in the rankings. The Rock type, another type said to have strong defense, actually finished down towards the bottom of the table in equal 13th with a score of 0, the 4 resistances being balanced by 4 weaknesses. The worst defensive type shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, with a defensive score of -3 is the Ice type, having 4 weaknesses and only 1 resistance. I then repeated the process for each type's offensive matchups, this time giving 2 points each time a type deals super effective damage, whilst taking 1 away for a resisted attack and 2 for an attack that has no effect. The scores for this battle were a lot closer, with 2 types sharing first place. Fairy, with 4 types weak to it and only 2 resisting it, and Ground, having 5 types it's strong against, 2 that resist it, and 1 that's immune, giving both a total of 6 points. The weakest offensive type, with a score of -4, was the Normal type, since it has no types that it deals super effective damage to, 2 types that resist it, and 1 that is immune to it. There are a few interesting things I wanted to mention before I get to the final scores. The first is that from a purely offensive standpoint, there was a tie for the most resisted type, those being Bug and Grass, each having 7 types that resist them. Secondly, the weakest type defensively was Grass as well, with a total of 5 weaknesses. Ice and Rock barely coming in above that, each with 4. Next, looking at the type that had the most types weak to it, it was actually a tie again, this time between Fighting and Ground, each with 5 types they deal super effective damage to. Second place was a 4-way tie, with Fairy, Ice, Fire and Rock all dealing super effective damage to 4 other types. Finally, we'll look at the types with the most resistances defensively, the top being Steel, which I mentioned earlier, but the second highest being Fire, with 6 resistances. Now, we're ready to go over the final results, but instead of just showing you numbers on a page, I'll do a tier list like I promised at the start of the video. For those who don't know, a tier list is a popular way of ordering things from best to worst. In the case of my list, I'm starting with E tier at the bottom, going up to A, then having S tier above that. Each of the tiers is based on the final score each type finished with when I added the offensive and defensive scores together. Starting off in E tier, all by itself we have the Normal type. While it didn't have a bad score defensively, its lack of offensive power really dragged it down, to a total score of -3. Next, in D tier, we have Dragon with a score of 0, Poison, Bug and Psychic all with -1, and Grass with -2. I was honestly surprised to see both Dragon and Psychic down here, both of them being considered overpowered types at various points in Pokemon's history, but it seems all the nerfs given to both types have brought them down. Looking up to C tier, getting towards the middle of the table, are Fighting with 3 points, and Electric, Ice and Dark, all with 1 point. The biggest surprise for me was just how much the offensive capabilities of both the Fighting and Ice types really boosted them, with the Fighting type having a defensive score of 0, while the Ice type had -3 before the attacking score was added, actually having the lowest defensive score of all the types as mentioned earlier. Moving to the top half of the tier list, in B tier are Flying, Rock and Water, each with a final score of 5. All 3 gained points on the offensive half of the scoring, but the biggest glow up out of the 3 was the Rock type, which gained all 5 of its points here. Water was actually the best out of the 3 defensively with a score of 3, with Flying just behind on 2. Going up once more to A tier, we have the newest type, Fairy, on 9 points, followed by Ground, Ghost and Fire, each with 7. It's honestly not surprising to see the Fairy type up near the top, which is widely regarded as one of the strongest types in the franchise currently, having a solid defensive score and tied for the best offensive score. All 4 A tier types scored solidly in both offense and defense, the weakest of the 4 defensively being the Ground type. Finally, standing alone in S tier with a final score of 11 points is the Steel type. Being boosted primarily by its incredible defensive score, 9, no other types came anywhere close to matching its outstanding bulk. Its 10 resistances and 1 immunity, coupled with it being one of the 2 types capable of hitting the Fairy type with super effective damage, mean that the Steel type is going to be beneficial on any team it's used on, whether that be competitively or on a playthrough team. Well anyway guys, if you've made it to the end of the video, thanks for listening, I hope you've enjoyed and I'll see you in the next one.